Hello everyone, my name's Ayla Bell, and there's a lot to love about Danganronpa. The story, the characters, the art style, the music. This guy, I'm honestly a little upset it took me so long to get into the franchise. But better late than never, right? Danganronpa isn't perfect though. I have some issues with it, and the one I'll discuss today has been bothering me, and some other people as well, for a while. Spoilers for Trigger Happy Havoc, Goodbye Despair, and the Danganronpa 3 anime. Okay, so we have our ultimate despair, Junko Enoshima. Super fun villain, and she's just as fashionable and charismatic as she is evil and insane. We come to learn that Junko is the catalyst for the biggest, most awful, most tragic event in human history, with a little bit of assistance from her twin sister Mukuro Ikusaba. She caused so many deaths, so much destruction, and caused so many people to plummet into despair, all for the fun of it and because she was bored. Being a top-tier manipulator and super intelligent, Junko was able to convince people to do exactly what she wanted in order to make this chaotic, despair-induced world a reality. She manipulated Juzo Sakakura into keeping the secret that she was the one who caused the incident back when it first started. She manipulated the Reserve Corps students into rebelling against Hope's Peak Academy. She manipulated Monica Toa into creating the Monokuma robots. She manipulated the Warriors of Hope into bringing despair to Toa City. She manipulated Ryota Mitarai into making a film that brainwashed people into doing her bidding. That last one is where the controversy comes from. See, before the Danganronpa 3 anime, we were entirely led to believe that everything bad that happened in the world happened because Junko was charismatic and a master-level manipulator. When we found out that the objectively best class of the series, Class 77B, along with their teacher, were actually the remnants of despair, followers of Junko who helped plunge the world into chaos and despair, we were all flabbergasted that these guys, who we've gotten attached to, were, in actuality, a bunch of terrorists who committed terrible crimes. Of course, they were surprised as well, as they had lost their memories of ever being remnants of despair. Nevertheless, that revelation was insane. It led us all to wonder how the heck Junko was able to convince 16 people who were all fairly happy, hope-filled individuals, to just give up on the world and become despair junkies. Some characters, you could argue, would be easy to manipulate given their personalities and backgrounds. Others, I had the hardest time wrapping my head around how she was able to convert them. Not only that, she somehow convinced the entire Reserve Corps to fall into despair as well. Most of us were just convinced that Junko was that good at manipulating people. We figured that she approached each character individually and used some sort of manipulative shenanigans to bring them to the side of despair. This only made Junko that much more threatening to us, which made her even cooler of a villain. But then the Danganronpa 3 anime happened, and she was able to convert the entire class because she had forced them to watch a brainwashing video feed. No convincing, no speech, just force them to sit and watch something that automatically warped their personalities. There was an extra stimulus in there to make the brainwashing more effective. For the teacher, it was brain probing, and for the students, watching their class president and best girl be executed. But at the end of the day, it was simple brainwashing. Huh. Okay, so it's time to teach you all about the rule of cool. The rule of cool is a decision made in stories, writing, or visual media that consists of making a cool thing happen in favor of something more logical. And by cool, I mean something that is physically or metaphorically and unnecessarily big, bombastic, or favorably quirky. This thing usually doesn't make much sense if you think about it too hard, but depending on the context, if it's done really well, you don't care all that much and actually enjoy its inclusion. Does all that make sense? Interestingly, there is a right and wrong way to utilize the rule of cool. While the cool action or spectacle has no real-world logic, it has to be logical to the context, tone, or genre of the story it's in. It also can't draw too much attention to itself to the point where your suspension of disbelief breaks. A good example of rule of cool is in the first two Home Alone movies. You could make the argument that the entirety of Kevin's plans to deal with the criminals is the rule of cool in action because logically, And realistically, he'd either call the police quicker or he'd get caught by the bad guys pretty quickly. But that wouldn't be cool, and the movie would be too short. The cool thing is to have him set up a house full of unrealistic traps that would 100% kill these bandits in real life, but only just really hurt them in the movie. But if you wanted to be super specific, 2 scenes come to mind that perfectly utilize the rule of cool. Both are in the second Home Alone movie, Lost in New York. The first case happens when Marv is getting electrocuted. For a second, he turns into a skeleton and then turns back into a human. Realistically, this wouldn't happen when you get electrocuted, but it's funny, it doesn't bring you out of the moment, and it's a cool visual. The second example is when Kevin coated a rope in kerosene and then later lit it on fire. Kerosene is super evaporative, and in the time between soaking it and when the criminals climbed on the rope, it wouldn't have actually caught the rope on fire with the match. Most people don't actually know that about kerosene, but even if they did, it doesn't matter because seeing the rope catch on fire was cool and it just added to the list of other torments the bandits had to deal with. So yeah, these are good examples of rule of cool. A bad example is in the live-action Kim Possible movie. That movie is already not good, but it actually has a lot of examples of bad usage of rule of cool. I'll only use one example because the more I think about this movie, the more frustrated I get. So there's this one scene where a character dropped her papers all over the floor and Kim sees how hard of a time she's having. And instead of walking over and picking up the papers like a normal person, Kim decides to do 1 or more flips while she picks them up before giving them back to the sad girl. In fact, a lot of the bad rule of cool usage in this movie consists of Kim doing unnecessary flips when it probably would have been faster and more efficient to just walk or run. I mean, it's cool that the actress knows how to flip and tumble and stuff, but the flipping is so cringy and desperately screams, "Look how cool I am!" and "I'm not like other girls," trademark. And it tends to be more of a hindrance more than a help. Just because you can flip doesn't mean you should. Before I continue with the rule of cool and how it relates to Danganronpa, please like this video so that YouTube can spread it to more people. And if you're still watching, write in the comments "Despair Bear" to let me know that you've made it this far, or put a bear emoji. Thank you. Anyway, so after all of that, what does any of this have to do with Danganronpa? Well, the idea that Junko, using only her skills and money for weapons and stuff, was able to turn all of Class 77B into despair junkies, and also managed to convince all of the Reserve Corps students to kill themselves using nothing but her knowledge and charisma is super cool. Not cool as in it's a good thing, but cool as in impressive. Cool, but super unrealistic. Regardless of how unrealistic it is, Danganronpa's story, characters, and overall logic can be kind of insane sometimes, so asking the audience to believe that Junko could do that isn't too much to ask. Personally, I thought what she did was unrealistic to the point where it did take me out of the story a bit, especially given this guy's existence. Like, I couldn't imagine a scenario where Junko could convince him over to the side of despair just through manipulation alone. Nagito is literally the exact opposite of Junko. She's a despair junkie, and he's a hope junkie. Neither of them can be easily converted to the opposite side. Nagito even tried to kill Junko because of what she was. I had a hard time wrapping my head around how any of that even happened. But I think, overall, most fans of Danganronpa were okay with the explanation and only respected Junko more, as that level of manipulation is frightening and deserving of the title Ultimate Despair. But then, the DR3 anime happened, and suddenly, we learned that Class 77B and the Reserve Corps students were basically hypnotized into doing the terrible things that they did. There was no free will on their parts, and not really even manipulation on Junko's part. Sure, she manipulated Midori into making/showing her the brainwashing technology, and sure, she manipulated Juzo and the Warriors of Hope, but almost literally everyone else was hypnotized or brainwashed. This makes way more sense. This was the only way, realistically, that she would be able to turn so many people over to the side of despair in such a small period of time. So, yeah, it's way more logical, but is that okay? I know a lot of fans were disappointed to learn that Junko wasn't as impressive as they thought she was. It was cooler to think that she used her charm and charisma to manipulate others to the side of despair. But now that we know she sort of cheated to make the tragedy happen, many lost respect for her. Even after all this time, I'm conflicted. On the one hand, I'm glad to have my confusions put to rest regarding how she did what she did in a way that makes sense, but at the same time, Junko just isn't as cool as I initially thought. Now don't get it twisted. Junko is still an insane, intelligent, entertaining, and unique manipulative mastermind, but she did lose some coolness points. The question then becomes, what would have been the correct decision? Would it have been better to keep her cool or to make her realistic? I use the term realistic really loosely here because even with the canon explanations, Danganronpa is still insane and super unrealistic as a whole, but you know what I mean. And I honestly don't know the correct answer. I was never 100% okay with either. I was annoyingly perplexed with the cool, and I was disappointed with the realistic. Maybe there was a happy medium that could have happened where Junko manipulated most characters and brainwash/hypnotize just the stubborn few. Would that have been better? I don't know. This could just be a standard case of the fans not being happy regardless of the decisions made, which is every fandom ever, but it's still an interesting question to ask. If comments and Danganronpa videos on YouTube are anything to go by, most fans prefer the cool route, while very few prefer the realistic. At the end of the day, what's done is done, and what's canon is canon. Danganronpa is still an awesome video game series that I recommend to anyone, especially if you love visual novels, anime, and murder mysteries. It's not perfect, but then again, no story is. Now tell me, what do you guys think? Which Junko situation would have been better for the story or your overall enjoyment? Comment below and let's get this conversation started. But as for now, that's all there is. There isn't any more.